Perhaps more than any other art form, textiles reflect the cultures from which they come. They are simultaneously personal, social, religious, and political. They are also valuable vehicles for the spread of ideas from one culture to another. Amongst the Yoruba in southwestern Nigeria, there is a highly developed textile art form which is called Adire. The word literally means that which is tied and dyed, but it is in fact a generic word for indigo pattern dyeing. The principle of Adire is the reservation of certain areas of the cloth from the dye, so that the pattern is seen in white or in lighter blue on the dark blue background. Adire was for a very long time a principal method of textile dyeing amongst the Yoruba. However, the availability of brightly colored imported fabrics has led to a decline in its production because it is highly labor-intensive and requires a level of persistent pursuit which is difficult to sustain in a country where poverty is rising sharply. In 1995, there are very few places left where Adire is still made. One of these is the Nikkei Center for Arts and Culture in Osogbo, which was founded in 1986. Here, Nikkei Davis, one of the leading figures in the Nigerian art world, provides studio and exhibition space, free tuition, accommodation, and often even food, as well as art materials for about 80 students. She has succeeded in creating a livelihood for many of them by introducing new techniques such as batik, dyed with chemical colors. Additionally, there are other artists who are attached to the Nikkei Center, producing and teaching oil painting, printmaking, bead pictures, wool appliqué, and welded or wooden sculptures. Apart from these new forms, often referred to as Osogbo art, Nikkei is trying to preserve the line and area exclusion method of Adire, a process with many and various techniques. Traditionally, every step of the process was reserved to specially trained women only. But since the traditional division of labor between men and women in Yoruba society no longer holds, these rules are no longer strictly enforced. This film does not pretend to represent a traditional situation, but rather to give an idea of the many skills that Adire production requires and how it is carried out today. Everything begins with the collection of the young leaves of the elu plant. Here, Silifat and one of her students is collecting a bundle of them. Silifat is her personal name, but she is usually called Iyalaro, a title given to a senior woman who is a master dyer with her own compound and business. Silifat comes from a family which has been engaged in Adire and indigo dyeing for generations. She met Nikkei Davis in 1990 at the textile market in Ibadan, where she was buying cloth with her sister, whom Nikkei knew. Nikkei invited Iyalaro to visit Osogbo, recognizing that she was one of the few experts in Adire still practicing the craft. Since then, Iyalaro has been involved with students at the Nikkei Center, passing on this valuable knowledge to the next generation. Once collected, the leaves have to be pounded in a wooden mortar with a large pestle. When they have been pulverized, a green-blue mass is left in the mortar. Yalaro scoops the residue out with her hands and molds it into balls, which she puts in the sun to dry for a few days. It is, after all, the slow oxidation of the elu plant that produces indigo blue. While they are drying, she prepares the alkaline solution in which they will later be dissolved. Shells from the fruit of the cocoa tree are collected, dried, and then slowly burned into ash. Petroleum or other modern chemicals cannot be used to accelerate the process, since that would contaminate the dye. After drying, the cocoa ash is placed in a heavy clay pot with a hole in the bottom, which is covered over with twigs. The pot thus functions as a kind of sieve that allows the water to run through the twigs, taking only the fine ash with it. The Yoruba word for this pot, and also for the water that runs through it, is oluba. The water now has the necessary alkaline property and is ready to be transferred to a special pot which the Yoruba called ikoko aro. These hold at least 100 liters of water and are made of clay. In the Nike center, they have been reinforced with cement. 100 to 125 elu balls are needed to produce a deep blue indigo color. The dried indigo is crumbling into the solution and left to stand for several days, depending on the weather. When it is hot, oxidation occurs in about 3 days, but during the cooler rainy season, it can take as long as a week. In either case, the mixture needs to be stirred for a good half-hour every day, and then carefully covered so that rainwater and airborne dirt are excluded. Finally, the indigo mixture is ready to receive the fabric. An experienced dyer knows when this has happened by tasting the dye or letting it run through her fingers, observing its color and feeling its consistency. The dye remains active for about 5 days, after which more indigo balls, 60 or so, and more alkaline water must be added. Then the dye is only good for another 3 days. This is why one has to prepare 3 or 4 pots with dye at different stages of maturity, so that there are always one or two that can be used for actual dyeing at any one time. The